The origin of Russians and Ukrainians according to the Bible. Have you ever thought about where Russians and Ukrainians come from? Given the events of the past year related to the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, many people have asked me which of Noah's sons and grandsons are considered their ancestors. Have you ever been curious about this topic? Would you like to learn about the biblical and theological origins of Russians and Ukrainians according to the scriptures? If this interests you, I invite you to watch another video where we explore the origins of all humanity as described in Genesis 10. For those who are already familiar with our series, please give this video a like so you don't forget. If you are new here, I encourage you to watch until the end. And if you find it valuable, consider subscribing to the channel. First, it's important to focus on Genesis chapter 10, which describes the ancestors of all humanity. This chapter contains the Table of Nations, a list of the different peoples of the world. In Genesis 10, 2-3, as many of you who follow our series may already know, the descendants of Japheth are mentioned. These include Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshech, and Tiras. Gomer, in turn, was the father of Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. It is interesting to note that Japheth, the son of Noah and the brother of Shem and Ham, is considered the ancestor of European and Asian peoples. For those who may not know, Japheth is the forefather of many European peoples, including the Portuguese, Spanish, Germans, and others. The descendants of Japheth, known as Japhethites, are generally associated with lighter skin tones, similar to white and Asian populations. Japheth's lineage gave rise to many peoples, including those from Russia and Ukraine. It is important to carefully study the biblical meaning behind each name of Japheth's children and grandchildren, as different nations have emerged from them throughout both Europe and Asia. In summary, both European and Asian peoples trace their ancestry back to Japheth's sons and grandsons. Let's start by looking at a name that is often mentioned when discussing Russia's origins, Magog. This name comes from an ancient Aramaic word that means vigorous, strong, and powerful. This meaning relates to the Russian people known for their resilience and endurance. Additionally, Magog is also the name of a land mentioned in the Bible, which shows that many of Noah's sons' names were linked to specific geographic regions. These names do not only refer to specific individuals, but also represent entire peoples and nations. In the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38, the story of Gog and Magog is mentioned. This passage refers to a nation and describes its leader as the prince of Meshech and Tubal. This means that these people originate from Meshech and Tubal, who were descendants of Japheth. More specifically, Meshech and Tubal were Noah's grandsons, as they were sons of Japheth. Russians are believed to be descendants of Japheth. The well-known historian Flavius Josephus identified Magog as the ancestors of the Scythians, meaning the Scythian people descended from Magog. The descendants of Japheth, such as Meshech and Tubal, played a significant role in the formation of nations, including Russia and Ukraine. The name Tubal in Hebrew means "you shall be brought." The name Tubal is associated with the ancestors of peoples from the Caucasus, Iberia, and various Eurasian regions, including Russia. Russians are considered descendants of Tubal because the name itself suggests the idea of being brought into a great war, as described in Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39. This is why the Russians are linked to Tubal. For this reason, they are referred to as the Prince of Meshech and Tubal, since they descend from Tubal and also have ties to the lineage of Meshech. These two groups, Meshech and Tubal, are often mentioned together in history and are believed to have contributed to the origins of Russia. When we think about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, we can compare it to the ancient disputes in the Middle East between brotherly nations. For example, Arabs and Jews have frequently been in conflict, yet they share the same ancestry and are biologically related. Their genetics and physical characteristics reveal that they are brothers, descended from the same forefather. Similarly, Russians and Ukrainians are also brotherly nations, but they have often been involved in conflicts throughout history. Both Russians and Ukrainians are descendants of Japheth, as indicated in ancient Jewish rabbinical teachings and interpretations. Since ancient times, the people who now identify as Russians and Ukrainians have lived in the lands that we today call Russia and Ukraine. The territories associated with Gog and Magog in historical and biblical texts always connect back to the descendants of Japheth. As mentioned earlier, Japheth is considered the forefather of all European and Indo-European peoples, according to the oldest genealogical records. The Prince of Meshech and Tubal is a title mentioned in biblical history. The name Meshech is linked to Musku, an ancient people recorded in Assyrian inscriptions. These inscriptions also mention Tubal, which refers to Tubal. This means that the Musku people are associated with Meshech, and the Tubal people are linked to Tubal. Historians believe that the Musku were originally the Phrygians from Asia Minor, who later migrated to Russia and merged with the Tubal people, forming what eventually became Russia. Now take a closer look at the similarities between these names. In ancient Assyrian records, Meshech is written as Musku. In the Bible, Meshech is called Meshech in Hebrew. In both Aramaic and Hebrew, Meshech is considered one of the ancestors of Russia. The name Musku and Meshech closely resemble the name of Moscow, the capital of Russia. This is no coincidence. The city of Moscow is believed to have been named after Meshech, one of Japheth's sons and a forefather of the Russian people. Thus, Moscow, Meshech and Musku all refer to the same ancestral figure, showing that the Russians descend from both Meshech, and Tubal. The capital of Russia, Moscow, carries the name of its ancestor Meshech, emphasizing its deep historical and biblical roots. Now, let's talk about Ukrainians. The Ukrainian people trace their ancestry to the ancient Scythians, who are biblically recognized as descendants of Madai. Madai, as mentioned earlier, was one of Japheth's sons and is considered the ancestor of the Aryan peoples. All Aryan peoples originate from Madai, meaning that Ukrainians are direct descendants of the ancient Scythians, who in turn descended from Madai. The Scythians spoke languages closely related to Persians and Parthians, who were also Japheth's descendants. Additionally, the Medes, an ancient civilization, were also descendants of Madai. It is fascinating to see the connection between the names Madai and Medes, showing their shared ancestry. Besides the Scythians, another major group that influenced Ukrainians were the Sarmatians, who spoke Iranian languages, meaning their language was related to ancient Persian. This means that two of the major ethnic groups that shaped Ukrainian ancestry, the Scythians and Sarmatians, were descendants of Madai, making them distant relatives of the Persians, Parthians, and Medes. However, Ukrainians also have ancestry from other groups, such as the Goths and the Varangians, also called Varinos, both of which were Germanic peoples. For those who may not know, the Germanic peoples, including the Vikings and other Scandinavian groups, trace their ancestry to Ashkenaz, a grandson of Japheth. Through Jewish traditions, Ashkenaz is considered the forefather of many Germanic peoples. It is important to understand the distinction between Slavic and Germanic peoples, as they are not the same. Some people ask, if both the Slavic and Germanic peoples come from Japheth, how are they different? The answer is that the Slavs descend from Magog and Tubal, while the Germanic peoples come from a different branch of Japheth's descendants. Although Slavs and Germanic peoples are related because they share a common ancestor, Japheth, they have distinct ethnic and linguistic backgrounds. However, they belong to different branches. The Germanic peoples are descended from Ashkenaz, who is recognized as the ancestor of the Germans and other Germanic groups. This diversity between Slavic and Germanic peoples highlights the richness of the various ancestral lines that make up the human family. Even though they share a common ancestor, Japheth, each branch has developed its own unique history and identity over time. It is important to recognize and respect these differences, as they serve as a reflection of God's creativity in shaping different nations and cultures. The term Ashkenazi Jews comes from their historical connection to Ashkenaz, a descendant of Japheth. Over time, Jewish communities in that region became known as Ashkenazi Jews due to their mixing with local peoples. I hope you all enjoyed this video about the origins of different peoples according to the Bible. Today we explored the lineage of the Russians, who descend from Meshech and Tubal, and the Ukrainians, who descend from Madai and Ashkenaz. If you like our series, The Origin of Peoples According to the Bible, don't forget to share this video and leave a comment about which group you would like us to cover in a future episode. Every week we bring new videos exploring the origins of different peoples based on Genesis chapter 10. On the side I've linked a video about the wives of Shem, Ham and Japheth. I'm sure you'll find it interesting. See you soon.